The all-American boy turning up the heat. Maximum of Bundy's crimes had been devoted, without witnesses around, but in some cases Bundy changed into getting extra proactive in his efforts to kill, and a few humans did see what he was doing with extra reviews flooding in. Approximately a man in a forged lurking in alleyways wherein lacking women were seen closing. A caricature artist began running with witnesses to get a clean picture of who this killer would possibly be. The cease results from the sketch artist confirmed a man who seemed equal to Bundy. Nevertheless, once again he became simply ignored due to the whole thing he turned into. This mixed with the records they already knew, approximately the sling and the beetle. The police didn't need to waste their time chasing a person who wasn't the killer. Leaving town, with matters heating up exponentially, Bundy was feeling the warmth despite the fact that the law enforcement officials did not even suspect him. He felt like matters were beginning to zero in on him, so it was extraordinary timing while he changed into well-known to study at the University of Utah Law School in August of 1974. He wasted no time packing his things and getting as a long way far from Seattle as possible. Perhaps this become a turning factor. Perhaps Bundy would stop killing, knowing that he was becoming easily identifiable through his signature actions. Murderer on tour. Bundy sought to lay low for a month at the same time as in Utah and failed to kill absolutely everyone. However, it became quick-lived. It wasn't long earlier that he began killing again. He killed numerous young girls, all in the area of months, considered one of which was the daughter of the Salt Lake City police leader. If anything, this just gave new drive to the police searching for a dangerous murderer. They may be approximately to get their most helpful tip yet. Bundy's ex-lady friend. I am dating a serial killer. Elizabeth Clufford dated Bundy whilst he lived in Washington Kingdom. The two had stayed in contact, and with news popping out about the murders and the capacity suspects, she noticed something really startling. The killer within the comic strip seemed like her ex-boyfriend Theodore Bundy. It wasn't just this, even though it became the auto and the reality that Ted had crutches and slings in his home, that she in no way understood why. Armed with a suspicion, Elizabeth started out calling King County police officers and the Salt Lake County Sheriff's Office. She instructed all of them about her suspicions while still speaking to Ted at the facet as if nothing turned into wrong. It was difficult for Elizabeth Clifford, who had welcomed Bundy into her home, and they would constructed a circle of relatives collectively, even as Bundy become nearly acting as a father to her daughter from a preceding relationship. I hate to even say this as it makes him sound every day, but I do suppose he cherished us. Technological gain. By way of 1975, Bundy became in Colorado, enacting his moves across the nation, claiming more lives and reveling in every moment of it. Washington law enforcement officials had been nevertheless struggling to determine the case out, and that all modified with the advent of the computer, what we might recall being a primitive device now in comparison to what exists now, changed into simply the main tool for answering a question that become pretty an awful lot answered years earlier with the help of this new gadget referred to as a computer and a developing database. They may want to input records into the device and examine it to present information. This led to lots of entries being combed via to discover a hard and fast of names that matched the crime. One of those names became Bundy's. This became a leap forward. However, it wasn't beneficial enough. This changed into a new shape of era, and the database wasn't something that changed into linked throughout state traces. All this supposed that they in all likelihood weren't aware about similar crimes being committed somewhere else. The painful truth is that they unnoticed a suspect they'd surely identified years before the advent of the laptop. Rather, they assumed this nicely groomed, apparently upstanding citizen could not, in all likelihood, be the killer he'd prevented seize because he acted quicker than they ever did, and it's supposed that many more could die due to their incapacity to keep away from profiling, arrested on a technicality at the same time as using round a community in suburban Salt Lake town. Bundy became pulled over by using a cop for looking suspicious. His vehicle turned into searched, and the contents had been the entirety, you'll assume, from a killer like Bundy, confronted with a ski mask, trash bags, handcuffs, a crowbar, duration of rope, and a nice shoes. And research into Bundy turned into officially underway in Salt Lake City, but they simply failed to discover anything that definitively linked him to any crimes. Freaked out, Bundy offered his yellow Beetle, which the police officers subsequently sequestered, and in doing so observed DNA proof that raised questions. The subsequent step was connecting him to actual crimes. They positioned Bundy in lineups and had him identified, giving them enough to attempt for an irritated kidnapping and attempted criminal assault. Lucky Ted were given his mother and father to bail him out, and became, as soon as once more unfastened man. Even as on bail, Bundy lived with Elizabeth like not anything turned into wrong. How are you ultimately bailed out? Ultimately bailed out? Oh boy, that is a complicated one. I likely should not say, however. Basically, my mom, through many pals, raised the cash amount on the time of Bundy's bail. Investigators from all of the jurisdictions he terrorized got together and discussed the case and decided they had a psycho on their palms, a real serial killer. They wanted to pursue it in addition, but needed to permit his case for kidnapping and assault took place first. Escape. The case towards Bundy resulted in a sentence of 1 to 15 years in prison. Even as locked up, he was charged with only a single murder of the various he'd definitely committed. Bundy became developing more and more determined. The idea of the loss of life penalty was looming closely over his head, keeping him up at night time. I do not need to die. I am now not going to child. You okay, youngster, or not? I deserve, in reality, the maximum extreme punishment society has within the following case. Towards him, he'd protect himself, and due to this selection, he wasn't subjected to shackles or restraints of any nature. As conniving as Bundy changed into, people nevertheless didn't capture on. He asked to go to a library, claiming he had to work there, a good way to shield himself appropriately. Nevertheless, even as he become there, he escaped. It took 6 days for them to recover him, as he'd spent 6 days out within the desert of the Aspen Mountains by myself. Bundy at the run. Bundy reputedly knew that at the same time as the case towards him was weak, they had in all likelihood succeed in nailing him for the murder, and that greater cases were destined to follow. He had to act rapid. He were given a floor plan of the prison, stored a few cash that smuggled in, and then were given a hacksaw earlier than escaping into an apartment upstairs, where he modified and walked out of prison. It was brazen, but it labored. He quick got from Chicago to Atlanta and all the manner to Florida with the aid of stealing and using multiple motors throughout the U.S. Along the manner, he managed to scouse, borrow a few wallets and other items from human beings to make sure he changed into organized financially to live off the grid. Final straw. Bundy should have taken his situation as a lesson and left nicely enough by myself. However, he determined otherwise. Bundy eventually started out killing again in Florida in 1978. At Florida Country University, Bundy strangled, assaulted, and even bit a series of ladies inside the area of 15 minutes. He wasn't completed, but however, he then left to an apartment building in which he nearly killed some other, however, left her alive however with severe cranium and jaw fractures in escaping the condo, constructing he left at the back of a pantyhose masks, which could be his largest downfall, with police officers furiously looking this deranged serial killer Bundy turned into on the move and one day changed into pulled over, and he attempted to make a run for it but became apprehended, ultimately by means of a cop who didn't even realize who he'd caught. He just stuck one and all. America's worst of the worsts, the cease of Bundy's reign of terror. Bundy, out of alternatives, confessed to the murders of 30 ladies. This is believed to be an undercount, but considering how many years he'd spent killing, on January 24, 1989, Bundy changed into finished within the electric-powered chair after languishing for over a decade in a Florida jail. His very last phrases earlier than the flip of the transfer have been, "I would such as you to offer my like to my circle of relatives and pals." The reign of Ted Bundy, one in every of America's most lethal criminals, had come to a brutal stop.